The gentle whir of Maya Chen's lathe filled her workshop with its familiar song. Curls of aromatic cedar spun away from her chisel as she shaped what would become the leg of a rocking chair. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the workshop's windows, catching the dancing motes of sawdust in golden beams. To the casual observer, she was nothing more than another colonist on New Haven, crafting furniture for the growing settlement. The colony's warning sirens shattered the peaceful afternoon. Maya's hands remained steady on her tools, even as her mind shifted to the military-grade motion sensors she quietly installed throughout the valley months ago. 3 ships, Vrekian make, approaching from the northwest. The rest of the colony erupted into practiced emergency protocols. Families hurrying to designated shelters, merchants securing their goods, the local militia mobilizing with their limited weapons. She took her time finishing the curve of the chair leg. There was no need to rush. The Vrekians always started with intimidation. The first sonic boom rattled her workshop's windows. Maya brushed sawdust from her heavy canvas apron, her movements unhurried, as she stored her tools with precise care. Each chisel, each saw, each implement returned to its proper place. Only then did she step outside, squinting up at the 3 angular ships that now dominated New Haven's sky. "Always so dramatic," she murmured, joining the growing crowd in the colony's central square. The ships were Vrekian Dominion make, but not military. Merchant vessels retrofitted with excessive weapon systems. Pirates masquerading as legitimate traders then. They were becoming more common in the outer colonies. The center ship's landing ramp descended with theatrical slowness, disgorging a dozen Vrekians in gleaming combat suits. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate golden markings on his armor, strutted down the ramp as if he owned the planet. Maya noted the slight irregularity in his gait, a compensating mechanism in his suit's left leg servos, perhaps. A weakness, if it came to that. "Greetings, humans of..." He paused, making a show of checking a datapad. "New Haven. I am Trade Commander Vaxtil. We've come to discuss your colony's contribution to the greater galactic economy." Maya suppressed a smile. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. The colony's actual mayor, Sarah Okonjo, stepped forward with admirable composure. "We're a registered Earth colony with established trade agreements. If you'd like to conduct legitimate business..." "Earth." Vaxtil's translator rendered his laugh as a harsh bark. "Earth is a dying world clinging to past glories. Out here, you operate under more practical arrangements." He gestured, and his soldiers spread out, weapons casually displayed. "We'll require 20% of your agricultural output and any exotic hardwoods you've cultivated. The furniture markets on Centauri Prime are quite lucrative." Maya watched the colony's militia members shift nervously. Their weapons remained holstered. They knew they were outmatched. She counted the Vrekian soldiers, noting their positions, their weapon types, the micro-adjustments in their stance that revealed their training level. Amateurs playing at being warriors, most of them. But their weapons were real enough. "The craftsman's quarter," Vaxtil continued, his eyes settling on Maya's workshop. "I hear you have quite the reputation for fine woodwork. We'll start there." Maya stepped forward, her voice carrying across the square with quiet authority. "My workshop is open to paying customers." The Vrekians turned toward her, and she could sense their dismissal through their faceplates. She knew what they saw. A middle-aged woman in sawdust-covered work clothes, with calloused hands and gray streaking her dark hair. Nothing threatening. Nothing remarkable. A carpenter. Vaxtil's translator couldn't quite capture the condescension in his tone. "Show me your works, human. I'll decide their worth." Maya led them to her workshop, aware of the worried glances from her fellow colonists. Inside, pieces in various stages of completion filled the space. Chairs, tables, cabinets, all revealing the careful attention to detail that had built her reputation. Vaxtil ran an armored hand along the surface of a nearly finished table. "Primitive," he declared, "but the materials have value. We'll take it all." "No," Maya said simply, returning to her lathe. "You won't." The workshop fell silent except for the soft whir of the lathe starting up again. The Vrikian soldiers shifted, uncertain how to handle such casual dismissal. Vaxtil stepped closer. Perhaps I wasn't clear. You were perfectly clear, Maya interrupted, not looking up from her work. And I declined. There's a difference between trade and theft. Commander, I suggest you learn it. A soldier raised his weapon, but Vaxtil held up a hand. Maya could feel his studied assessment. She continued working, each movement precise, controlled. She'd spent years perfecting these motions, understanding the behavior of wood grain, the perfect angle of a cut, the exact pressure needed. Not so different from other skills she'd spent years honing. You have spirit, carpenter, Vaxtil said finally. But spirit doesn't stop plasma bolts. You have one day to prepare your goods for transport. After that, we take them. And perhaps we take you as well. The labor markets are also quite lucrative. Maya finally looked up, meeting his gaze through his faceplate. For just a moment, she let her carefully maintained facade slip, allowing him to see what lay beneath. Vaxtil took an involuntary step back. One day, he repeated, but his confident tone had wavered. He turned sharply, his soldiers following as they marched out of the workshop. After they left, Maya examined the table Vaxtil had touched. His armored hand had left a slight mark in the finish. She'd have to refinish it. She didn't like leaving work imperfect. Sarah Okonjo hurried in as soon as the Vrikians were gone. Maya, I'm so sorry. We can try to hide some of your pieces, or... It's fine, Sarah, Maya said, already gathering specific tools and moving them to a special cabinet. But you might want to make sure everyone stays in the shelters tomorrow. What are you going to do? Maya ran her hand along the grain of the marked table, feeling the wood structure, its strength. Like all her materials, she knew it intimately. Just as she knew every corner of her workshop, every shadow in the colony, every weakness in Vrikian combat armor. I'm going to protect my work, she said simply. It's what I've always done. That evening, as the colony's 3 moons rose, Maya sat in her workshop, methodically checking her tools. Each one was perfectly maintained, perfectly balanced. The wood shavings and sawdust that covered every surface could tell an attentive observer so much about movement, about footsteps, about positions. She'd chosen this life carefully, this quiet pursuit of creation rather than destruction. She'd found peace in crafting things that would last, that would hold memories and moments for generations. But she hadn't forgotten. Her hands might be calloused from woodwork now, but they remembered other skills. Tomorrow, the Vrikians would learn why Earth's enemies had whispered warnings about her during the war, why she'd been called the Ghost Blade, why she'd chosen such a quiet retirement. Maya smiled softly as she worked through the night, preparing. Sometimes, the most dangerous predator was the one that had chosen to sheathe its claws. The pre-dawn hours found Maya methodically applying a dark stain to her workshop's floor. Each stroke was precise, the pattern seemingly random but carefully calculated. To untrained eyes, it merely refreshed the worn woodwork. She knew better. The work brought memories unbidden. Another dawn, 15 years ago, when she prepared a different kind of field. The Earth Defense Command bunker had hummed with desperate energy. Ghost Blade, General Torres had said, they've broken through the Luna perimeter. Her old call sign, back when she'd been EDC's most effective operative, back before she'd chosen sawdust over blood. Maya's hands remained steady as she worked, but her jaw tightened. The Vrikians hadn't recognized her because they'd never seen her face. During the war, she'd been a shadow, a whispered threat. Their finest warriors would simply disappear. No signs of struggle, no grand battles, just silence and empty armor found in forgotten corridors. The colony was stirring now. She could hear the worry and hurried footsteps passing her workshop, families making their way to the shelters. Several colonists had offered to help her move her furniture, protect her work. She declined politely. The furniture wasn't what needed protection. How many ships? She'd asked Torres that day. 17. They're best hunters. They're here for you, Ghost. She'd nodded, checking her gear one last time. Good. Then they won't be hunting anyone else. A knock at her workshop door pulled her from the memory. Sarah stood there, concern etched on her face. Maya, the militia wants to try negotiating. Maybe if we offer them something else. No negotiations, Maya said, rising smoothly from her work. Some people only understand one language. We can't fight them. Their weapons are just tools, Maya interrupted gently. Like any other. The wielder matters more than the weapon. She gestured at a beautifully carved rocking chair. That chair took me 3 weeks to make. Every curve, every joint, every detail required patience, understanding, and precision. Combat is no different. Sarah studied her, really looked at her for perhaps the first time. During the war, who were you? Maya turned back to her work. Someone who got very, very tired of violence. Please make sure everyone stays in the shelters. The morning progressed, sunlight creeping across Maya's workshop floor, highlighting the fresh stains, subtle patterns. She took inventory one final time. 12 Vrikian soldiers, 3 ships, probably more crew aboard. Standard Vrikian combat doctrine would keep at least 2 gunners per ship. 18 targets, maximum. She eliminated the 17 hunter ships one by one. Not with grand battles or superior firepower. Simply by understanding their patterns, their weaknesses. A cut pressure line here, a severed power coupling there. Space was vast, but ships needed specific things to function. Like the human body, they had vital points. You just had to know where to strike. The first sonic boom announced the Vrikians' return. Maya changed her clothes methodically, trading her sawdust-covered work gear for simple dark attire that wouldn't restrict movement. From a hidden compartment beneath her lathe, she retrieved a single, slender blade. Not military issue. She'd forged it herself, understanding steel the same way she understood wood. The workshop's walls vibrated as the ships landed. Maya settled into her chair, blade resting across her lap, and waited. Vax Till would make a show of it. His type always did. Right on cue, heavy footsteps approached. The door burst open, Vrikian soldiers flooding in with weapons raised. Vax Till strode in last, his damaged leg servos whining slightly. Time's up, Carpenter, he announced. I must admit, I expected you to run. Maya smiled softly. Running takes more effort than staying. Besides, she gestured at her works. I hate leaving projects unfinished. Admirable dedication. Vax Till sneered. Secure her. We'll let the labor markets appreciate such commitment. 2 soldiers advanced. Maya remained seated, watching their feet disturb the freshly stained floor. You chose the wrong colony, she said quietly. And why is that? Vax Till asked, amused. Because I chose it first. Maya's voice changed, carrying the weight of old battles. 15 years ago, your people sent 17 ships to hunt the Ghost Blade. Do you know what happened to them? The amusement vanished from Vax Till's posture. The Ghost Blade is a myth. A story to frighten recruits. Myths don't retire, Maya said, rising slowly. They don't learn to craft furniture. They don't find peace in creating rather than destroying. Her blade caught the morning light, but sometimes they remember who they were. The nearest soldier lunged. Maya moved like water, her blade a whisper of steel through the air. The soldier's armor hissed, pressure seals failing at precisely cut points. He collapsed, systems disabled but flesh untouched. I studied Vrikian armor design, Maya continued conversationally, stepping over the fallen soldier. The same way I study wood grain. Everything has patterns, weaknesses. The trick is understanding them completely. Chaos erupted. Plasma bolts scorched the air, but Maya was never where they fired. She flowed through her workshop like a shadow, blade finding the exact points where armor joined, where systems connected. The freshly stained floor pattern revealed itself, showing her exactly where they'd step, how they'd move. She'd laid this battlefield as carefully as she carved her finest pieces. Their finest hunters had fallen the same way, not to superior firepower or brute force, but to perfect understanding of their weaknesses, to patience, to precision. Vax still backed away as his soldiers fell, disabled with surgical accuracy. "What are you?" "Just a carpenter," Maya replied, blade gleaming, who never forgot how to carve. The battle that followed would be whispered about in Phrygian space for years to come. How their warriors were dismantled like poorly made furniture. How their ships were grounded by cuts so precise they looked like accidents. How the ghost blade hadn't lost her edge, just chosen to use it differently. When it was over, Maya cleaned her blade carefully before returning it to its hiding place. She had a rocking chair to finish after all. And perhaps, she thought, looking at the disabled but living Phrygians being loaded onto their own ships for transport to Earth authorities, some lessons about craftsmanship had been learned. The colonies would be quieter after this. Word would spread. Not about the ghost blade. That legend could stay in the past where it belonged. But about a simple carpenter who believed in doing things right. About a colony that wasn't worth the trouble. Maya returned to her lathe as the ships departed. She had work to do, and the wood was waiting. Some things were worth protecting, some skills worth maintaining, and some peace worth keeping. Word spread quickly through the galactic underworld. 3 Phrygian ships, disabled without a single fatality. 17 crew members, their advanced combat suits transformed into elaborate prisons by cuts so precise they seemed impossible. The stories grew with each retelling, but one detail remained constant: a simple carpenter's workshop on a colony world called New Haven. Maya knew they would come. The quiet ones, the dangerous ones, those who saw challenge rather than warning. She continued her work, each piece of furniture a quiet rebellion against the violence she knew approached. A cradle for the colony doctor's newborn, a dining table for the Schmidt family. Life continuing, creating, growing. The first sign came 6 weeks after Vaxstill's defeat. A missing supply shuttle. Then communication arrays began failing, one by one. Someone was isolating New Haven, methodically and patiently. "They're hunting us," Sarah said one evening, standing in Maya's workshop doorway. "Like they hunted Earth during the war." Maya's hands moved steadily across the cradle's wooden surface, sanding in long, precise strokes. "No," she replied quietly. "They're hunting me. The colony is just their net." She remembered another hunt years ago, how they'd used civilian targets to draw her out, how she'd learned that sometimes victory meant becoming exactly what your enemy feared. "The militia spotted their ships," Sarah continued. "Not Phrygian this time. The markings are different." "The Shadowclaw Syndicate," Maya said, testing the cradle's gentle rocking motion. "They're not pirates or raiders. They're something far worse." She looked up at Sarah. "They're true believers." "In what?" "The old ways. The right of the strong to rule the weak. To them, Earth's survival was an insult. Our continued expansion into the stars, an affront." Maya's voice carried old steel. "During the war, they worked with anyone who promised to help subjugate humanity. Now they're mercenaries, but their goals haven't changed." Sarah's face paled. "What do they want?" "To prove something. To themselves, to their clients, to the galaxy." Maya rose, her movements liquid grace. "They want to show that humanity's legends can bleed." The workshop fell silent except for the soft creak of the cradle's rockers. Maya ran her hand along its smooth surface, feeling the wood grain's subtle patterns. "I need you to evacuate the colony." "What?" "We can't just." "You can, and you will." Maya's tone brooked no argument. "The Syndicate doesn't care about civilian casualties. They'll burn this colony to ash to draw me out. I won't allow that." "So you'll face them alone. That's suicide." Maya smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The Ghost Blade faced worse odds. "You're not the Ghost Blade anymore." Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. You're Maya Chen. You make furniture. You create beautiful things. You. I am both, Maya interrupted gently. The patience I learned as the ghost blade makes me a better carpenter. And the precision I've learned as a carpenter. She let the sentence hang. That night, as the colony's evacuation began under cover of darkness, Maya prepared her workshop one final time. Each tool found its place. Each piece of in-progress furniture was carefully covered. The floor's surface was swept clean, then prepared with subtle marks only she would recognize. The syndicate ships appeared at dawn, 5 sleek predators descending from the clouds. Their design spoke of death, all sharp angles and weapon mounts, no pretense of being traders or merchants. They were hunters, pure and simple. Maya stood in her workshop's doorway, watching them land. Their leader emerged first, a figure in armor that seemed to swallow light. Unlike the Vrekians' flashy displays, this was functional, deadly. The helmet turned toward her, studying. Ghost blade. A voice emerged, feminine but hard as diamond. I am Shadow Matron Valseth. You know why we've come. I do. Maya's voice carried across the empty colony square. Just as you know how this will end. You think you can defeat us as easily as those Vrekian thugs. A harsh laugh. We are the Shadow Claw. We studied every disappearance, every mysterious failure. We know your methods. Maya nodded. Then you know I could have sabotaged your ships during the night, disabled your weapons, poisoned your air supply. The Shadow Matron's posture shifted slightly. But you didn't. No. Maya stepped forward. Because you deserve better. You believe in the old ways, in proving strength. Her hand moved to her side, drawing her blade. Then prove it. 30 warriors emerged from the ships, their armor drinking in the morning light. Each moved with lethal grace, carrying weapons that could reduce the colony to cinders. You would face us in direct combat. The Shadow Matron's voice held genuine curiosity. The legendary Ghost Blade, fighting in the open. Maya's blade caught the sunlight. I'm not just the Ghost Blade anymore. I'm a carpenter, a creator, and I'm tired of hiding who I am. The Shadow Matron raised a hand, and her warriors spread out in perfect formation. Then show us who you've become. The battle that followed would reshape how the galaxy viewed humanity. Maya moved like living shadow, her blade finding impossible angles, striking points that shouldn't have been vulnerable. But she didn't hide, didn't rely on stealth or misdirection. Each movement was a demonstration of mastery, over space, over form, over the very principles of combat. She fought as she crafted, with precision born of perfect understanding. The syndicate warriors were elite, but they faced something they couldn't comprehend. An artist who had made violence into art, then chosen to create instead of destroy. The Shadow Matron watched her warriors fall, disabled but alive, their armor transformed into prisons by cuts so precise they seemed to defy physics. Finally, she stepped forward herself, drawing twin energy blades. Beautiful, she said, genuine admiration in her voice. You've transcended what you were, become something new. Maya inclined her head slightly. We all have that choice. Their duel was poetry in motion, a deadly dance of light and shadow. The Shadow Matron was brilliant, her attacks coming from impossible angles. But Maya had spent years understanding how things worked, how they moved, how they broke. In the end, it came down to a single strike. Not to disable or destroy, but to demonstrate. Maya's blade found the exact point where the Shadow Matron's armor connected, separating it with surgical precision. The piece fell away, revealing the face of a young woman with eyes full of wonder rather than defeat. How? Understanding, Maya replied simply. Of materials, of motion, of purpose. The same principles that let me shape wood, let me shape combat. The Shadow Matron looked at her fallen warriors, then back at Maya. The old ways can change, Maya finished, like everything else. As the sun climbed higher, the syndicate ships departed, carrying stories that would become legend. not of the ghost blade's deadliness, but of something far more powerful, the choice to be more than what you were made to be. Maya returned to her workshop, blade cleaned and stored. The cradle waited, needing only its final touches. Outside, she could hear the colony stirring back to life as people returned home. She smiled, running her hands along the cradle's smooth wood. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from what you could destroy, but from what you chose to create instead. News of the Shadowclaw Syndicate's defeat spread through the galactic underworld like wildfire. But this time, the stories were different. They spoke not of fear or terror, but of transformation, of precision that transcended violence, of art in motion. The final challenge, when it came, was inevitable. Maya sensed them before she saw them. 3 massive ships descending through New Haven's atmosphere with deliberate slowness. No stealth, no subterfuge. Their hulls bore the mark of the Crimson Void Legion, the elite warriors who had nearly broken Earth's defenses in the final days of the war. She continued working on her latest piece, a memorial bench commissioned by the colony, carved with scenes of Earth's history. Her hands moved steadily across the wood as the ships landed, their massive forms casting long shadows in the setting sun. "They're the best," General Torres had told her during the war. "The Legion doesn't just kill, they elevate death to an art form." Each warrior trains for decades before earning their armor. The Legion commander who emerged from the center ship moved with liquid grace despite his massive armor. Unlike the Freakians or the Syndicate, there was no posturing, no threats. He simply walked to her workshop door and waited. Maya finished the curve she was carving before looking up. "You're far from home, Legion Commander." "Vorkath," he supplied, his voice resonating with harmonic undertones. "And home is a relative concept. Ghost Blade. Or do you prefer Master Chen now?" "Maya is fine." She set her tools down with careful precision. "You're not here to arrest me or kill me." "No," Vorkath's helmet tilted slightly. "We're here to understand." That made her pause. "Understand what?" "How you transcended." He gestured at her workshop, at the pieces in various stages of completion. "We of the Legion spend our lives perfecting the art of war. But you found something more. Something that made you deadlier even as you chose peace." Maya stood, brushing sawdust from her clothes. "You want to learn carpentry. We want to learn synthesis." Vorkath's voice held no mockery. "Your defeat of the Shadowclaw was enlightening. You fought not as a warrior trying to be peaceful, but as something entirely new." Outside, the other Legion warriors remained by their ships, their posture respectful rather than threatening. Maya studied them, seeing what others might miss, the way they observed her workshop, the subtle shifts in their stance that spoke of genuine curiosity. "Understanding wood," she said finally, "requires accepting that you can't force it to be what it isn't. You have to work with its nature, its grain, its inherent strength and weakness. Combat is no different." "Show us," Vorkath said simply. Maya picked up a piece of cedar, recently cut. "This wood has natural lines of cleave, ways it wants to split. Fighting against them wastes energy and ruins the material. But understanding them." She applied precise pressure, and the wood separated cleanly along its grain. "That's where mastery begins." "Like finding the seams in armor," one of the other Legion warriors observed. "Exactly." Maya set the wood down. "But it goes deeper. When I craft furniture, I'm not just shaping wood. I'm creating something that must work with the people who use it. A chair isn't just about looking beautiful. It has to support, to comfort, to last." Vorkath nodded slowly. "And in combat, the same principles apply. It's not about destroying your opponent. It's about understanding the entire situation and shaping it toward the best outcome." She gestured to her workshop. "Every piece of furniture here requires dozens of precise cuts, joints that must fit perfectly, finishes that protect and enhance. Making a mistake usually means starting over. But in combat, there are no second chances," another Legion warrior said. which is why understanding must come first. Maya moved to her workbench, running her hand along its scarred surface. During the war, I was effective because I learned every detail of enemy ships, armor, and tactics. But I was still just destroying. Now you create, Vorkath finished, and that understanding makes you deadlier than ever. Not deadlier, Maya corrected. More precise, more purposeful. She picked up her carving tool, its edge gleaming. Would you like me to demonstrate? What followed was unlike any combat training the Legion had ever experienced. Maya showed them how wood grain could teach timing, how the patience required for perfect joints translated to reading an opponent's movements, how the same principles that made furniture beautiful and functional could make combat more efficient and less lethal. The Legion warriors, masters of combat themselves, found themselves learning to see battle through new eyes. They practiced with wooden training weapons Maya crafted specifically for each of them, learning how materials could teach movement. As the day progressed, something extraordinary happened. The Legion warriors began to understand what Maya had discovered years ago, that true mastery transcended the boundaries between creation and combat. Your defeat of the Shadow Claw, Vorkath said as the sun began to set, wasn't about superior combat skills. Maya smiled, testing the balance of a training sword she just completed. No, it was about showing them a different way. The same principles that let me shape wood let me shape the outcome of that confrontation. You made them question their assumptions, another warrior observed, practicing a move Maya had shown them. Like wood grain showing the true path of a cut. The galaxy is changing, Vorkath said, watching his warriors train. The old ways of pure combat, perhaps they're as limiting as fighting against the grain. Maya nodded, making a minor adjustment to one of the training weapons. There will always be those who choose violence, but understanding the principles of creation, it opens up possibilities they can't see. As the Legion ships departed that evening, they left not with tales of the Ghost Blade's prowess, but with something far more valuable, the beginning of understanding how creation and combat could merge into something greater than either alone. Maya returned to her memorial bench, adding details to the carved scenes. Each cut was precise, purposeful, telling a story not just of conflict, but of growth and transformation. Like the wood she shaped, humanity's path forward wasn't about forcing change, but about understanding the natural lines along which progress could flow. The bench would stand in New Haven Square, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from what we destroy, but from what we choose to create instead. 5 years after the Legion's visit, Maya's workshop had changed. Alongside the tools of woodcraft stood training weapons, each carefully designed to teach the principles she had discovered. Students came from across the galaxy, not to learn combat, but to understand the synthesis of creation and conflict. On this particular morning, Maya watched a young Vrekian carefully shape a piece of oak, his movements precise and patient. Nearby, a former Shadowclaw warrior practiced flowing movements with a wooden training blade, understanding how each motion connected to the next like grain in wood. The galaxy's greatest warriors, Sarah remarked, standing beside Maya, coming to learn carpentry. Sometimes, I still can't believe it. Maya smiled, adjusting the student's grip on the woodworking tool. They're learning more than carpentry. They're learning that true strength comes from understanding, not dominance. The workshop had expanded, now including a training area where the principles of woodcraft merged with movement. The walls display both finished furniture and training implements, each piece telling part of the story of this evolution. She remembered the first group of Legion warriors who had returned, months after Vorkath's visit. They had come not for combat training, but to learn how to create. Understanding materials, one had said, has made us better warriors by teaching us when not to fight. A commotion outside drew their attention. A ship was landing, sleek, elegant, bearing the marks of the Galactic Council. Maya had been expecting this visit, though she hadn't told anyone else. The council representative who emerged was a human, Dr. Elena Santos, her formal robes marking her position. She walked directly to Maya's workshop, took in the scene of various species working together, and smiled. So the reports were true, Elena said. The legendary ghost blade has become something even more remarkable. A teacher of peace through craft. Maya set down the tool she was holding. That's not why you're here, Doctor. No. Elena's expression grew serious. We're here because what you've started is spreading. The Legion has opened schools combining combat training with creative arts. The Shadowclaw Syndicate is transforming into a guild of artisan warriors. Even the Vrekians are talking about honor through creation rather than conquest. And this concerns the Council. It gives the Council hope. Elena produced a small holocube, activating it to show images from across the galaxy. Warriors learning to create. Artisans understanding combat not to destroy, but to better preserve peace. You've started something, Maya. Something that could change everything. Maya watched her students work, former enemies now learning side by side. Change was inevitable. I just showed them a different path. The Council wants to establish an official academy. Elena continued. Not for war, not for peace, but for understanding. We want you to help design it. Maya was quiet for a moment, running her hand along a piece of half-finished furniture. During the war, I learned every weakness, every flaw in enemy design. I used that knowledge to destroy. Now I use the same understanding to create, to teach, to transform. She looked at Elena. Are you sure the Council is ready for that kind of change? The old ways are failing, Elena said simply. Look around you. The most feared warriors in the galaxy, learning to shape wood with the same precision they once used to take lives. You've proved there's another way. Maya watched as the Vrekian student completed his cut, the wood splitting perfectly along its grain. The pride in his eyes wasn't from destruction, but creation. Nearby, the former Shadowclaw warrior moved through her forms, each motion flowing naturally into the next, like water following its natural course. The academy cannot be about teaching my way, Maya said finally. It has to be about helping each student find their own path to understanding. That's exactly what the Council wants, Elena agreed. A place where the line between warrior and creator blurs, where understanding leads to peace not through weakness, but through deeper strength. Maya nodded slowly. Then I'll help. But I keep my workshop here. Some lessons can only be learned in simple places, doing simple things. As Elena left with the preliminary agreement, Maya returned to her students. The Vrekian was starting a new project, a cradle similar to the one she had made years ago. The Shadowclaw warrior had set aside her training blade to learn how wood grain could guide tool movement. Will you leave us? Sarah asked quietly. No, Maya replied, picking up her tools. I'll help design their academy, teach when needed. But my place is here. This workshop, it's where everything changed. For me, for them, for the galaxy. That evening, as her students departed, Maya sat in her workshop, surrounded by the tools and creations that had helped reshape the galaxy's understanding of strength. On her workbench lay two projects, a delicate music box she was crafting for Sarah's daughter, and a training blade that would help a Legion warrior understand the flow of combat through the grain of wood. She ran her hands along both pieces, feeling the potential in each. The galaxy was changing, not through force or war, but through understanding. Through the recognition that the same principles that guided creation could guide everything else. The ghost blade had become a legend through destruction. Maya Chen would become a legend through creation. And somewhere between these two truths, she had found something greater than either. A way to transform the galaxy, not by breaking it, but by showing it how to grow along its natural grain. Outside, the sun set on New Haven, its light catching the memorial bench in the square. The carved scenes seemed to come alive in the golden light, not just stories of war and peace, but of transformation, of understanding, of finding strength not in what you could destroy, but in what you could create. Maya smiled, turning back to her work. There were still pieces to shape, lessons to teach, understanding to share. The galaxy was learning, growing, changing. One careful cut, one precise movement, one moment of understanding at a time. And that, she knew, was the greatest victory of all.